think Curious George is really funny. When my kids were little, they used to call him Monkey George, and this was a book that they really liked. I don't know if they liked it because they thought it was funny or because it was one of the longer Curious George books and that meant they get to stay up later. But either way, this is a really fun book where George learns the alphabet. And here's George and the man with the yellow hat. And they've got a paper and easel and some pencils. I wonder what they're going to do. It looks like the easel's set up and George is ready to do some writing or drawing. I'm not sure which, but it's that title page is Curious George Learns the Alphabet by H.A. Rey. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey, but he was always curious. This morning, George was looking at some of his friend's books. They were full of little black marks and dots and lines, and George was curious what could one do with them. The man with the yellow hat came in just in time. "You don't tear a book apart to find out what's in it," he said. "You read it, George. Books are full of stories, and stories are made of words, and words are made of letters. And if you want to read a story, you first have to know the letters of the alphabet. Let me show you." And the man took a big pad and began to draw. George was curious. "This is an A," the man said. "The A is the first letter in the alphabet." My favorite thing about George is that he's curious, because you know what? You can't learn something unless you're curious. Now we add 4 feet and a long tail, and the A becomes an alligator with his mouth wide open. The word alligator starts with an A. This is a big A. There's also a small a. All letters come in big and small. This is a small a. It looks like a piece of apple. George knew alligators and apples. You could eat apples, and alligators could eat you if you didn't watch out. This is a big B. The big B looks like a bird if we put feet on it, and the tail is in a bill. The word bird begins with a B. Birds come in all colors. This bird is blue, and George loved to watch the birds. This is a small bee. It could be a bee. This bee is buzzing around a blossom. The bee's body has black and yellow stripes. George kept away from bees. They might sting, and that would be bad. I also love how George uses his imagination to turn the letters into other things, like the capital B or the big B being a bird, and the little b being a bumblebee. And the things he imagines them all start with that letter. So B starts with B, and bird starts with B. This is a big C. We will make it into a crab, a big crab with a shell and feet and 2 claws. This is a small C. A small C is like a big C, only smaller, so it becomes a small crab. It's cute. Crabs live in the ocean. They can swim or run sideways and backwards. Crabs can be funny, but they can also pinch you. "You now have 3 letters, George," the man said. A, B, and C, and with these 3 letters you can make a word. The first word you can read yourself. The word is cab. Cab. You know what a cab is. I once took you for a ride in a cab, remember? And now let's draw the next letter. A cab is another word for a taxi, or sometimes we call them Ubers or Lyfts now. It's when you hire someone to drive you from one place to another. The big D could be a dinosaur. There are no live dinosaurs today. They have died out. Those you see in museums are dummies. George had seen dinosaurs in a museum once. The small d looks like a dromedary. A dromedary is a camel with 1 hump. Riding on a dromedary can make you dizzy because it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. The big E is an elephant. He is eating his evening meal, eggplants. George loved elephants. The small e could be the ear of a man or the ear of a monkey. People's ears and monkeys' ears look very much alike. So see how he's imagining them to look like something that starts with the letter. So the E is an elephant and the small e is an ear. The big F is a fireman fighting a fire. Never fool the fire department or you'll go to jail, and that's no fun. The small f is a flower. George's friend was fond of flowers. George preferred food. The big G is a goose. Goose starts with a G, like George. The small G is a goldfish, and he's in a glass bowl. Now you know 7 letters, George, said the man. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. With these letters, we can already make quite a few words. I have written some of them down for you. You read them while I get your lunch. Dad, Ed, bad, bag, cage, feed, bed. It seems like the only word you can read is bad, said the man when he came back. I think we've had enough for one morning. I'll feed you now, and then you'll take your nap. After your nap, we'll go on with our letters. That George, instead of reading them, he made them into a cape. Crazy. The big H is a house. It stands on a hill behind a hedge. George's home used to be a jungle, but now he lives in a house. The small H is a horse. He's happy because he has heaps of hay. George had his own horse, a hobby horse. The big I is just a long line going straight down. It does not look like much. It could be an icicle. The small I is a line with a dot on top. It could be an iguana. An iguana is a sort of lizard. Iguanas don't like ice. They like warm sunshine, and so does George. The big J is a jaguar. Jaguars live in the jungle. George knew jaguars. He had lived in the jungle once. The small J is a jack-in-the-box. George had a jack-in-a-box as a toy. He just loved to make it jump. The big K is a kangaroo called Katie, and the small K is a small kangaroo. He is Katie's kid, although a baby kangaroo is actually... The big L is a lion. He's lucky. He's going to have a leg of lamb for lunch, and he loves it. And the small L is a lean lady. She's strolling along a lake licking a lollipop. George liked lollipops. The big M is a mailman. His name is Mr. Miller. He brings a letter. Maybe it's for me, thinks George. The small M is a mouse. He is munching mints. And do you know what else it is, said the man to George? M is the 13th letter of the ABC, and the whole alphabet has only 26 letters, so 13 is just half of it. You can make a lot of words with these letters. Why don't you try? Here's a pad and pencil. George started to think of words, and then he wrote them down. It was fun to make words out of letters. Let me see, said the man. Ball, milk, cake, ham, jam, egg, lime, feed, kid. That's very good. But what on earth is dog? Or a glidged? Or a blimidididum? I don't think there are such things. Not just any letters make words, George. Wow, let's look at some letters now. The big N is a napkin. Standing on a dinner plate, it looks neat. George had seen napkins folded that way in the restaurant when he was a dishwasher. The small N is a nose. It has a face and on the face of a man. He has a new blue necktie on and is nibbling noodles. The big O is a big ostrich, and the small O is a small ostrich, of course. Ostriches eat objects. One ostrich once had tried to eat a bugle that belonged to George. The big P is a big penguin, and the small p is a small penguin. These penguins live near the South Pole. They use their flappers as paddles. George knew penguins from the zoo. The big Q is a quail. Quails have short tails. You must keep quiet if you want to watch quails, as they are quite shy. The small q is a quarterback. A quarterback has to be quick. George was quick. He would qualify for a quarterback. And now get your football, George, said the man. It will do you good to play a little before we go on with your letters. George knew how to play the game, and he knew how to carry the ball, and how to take a three-point stance, and how to get ready for the kickoff. He was a fine halfback, too, and he could even make a short pass or recover a fumble. Good game, said the man. But time's up now. Back to the alphabet. The big R is a rabbit. Some rabbits are white with red eyes. Rabbits love radishes. George loved rabbits. He had one as a pet. The small r is a rooster. The rooster crows when the sun rises. Two roosters will start a rumpus. They can really get rough. The big S is a big snail, and the small s is a small snail. Snails are slow. They sneak into their shells when they're scared of something. George thought snails looked silly. The big T is a table. If the table is set for two, it's time for tea. George did not care for tea, but he liked toast. The small t is a tomahawk. George had a toy tomahawk. It was a very tiny one, and he took it along when he played outside. Now it's time for a snack, said the man. Run over to the baker, George, and hand him this note. Then come back with the donuts. 1 dozen of them. No tricks, please. George was curious. He looked at the note the man had written. 1 dozen donuts. Maybe he could write something on it too. How about writing 10 instead of 1? He had just learned the T, first a T, then an E, then an N. Said the baker. 10 dozen donuts is quite a lot, but that's what the note says. We'll need an extra big bag for them. 10 dozen donuts. That is 120 donuts, just so you know. That's a lot of donuts for 2 people. Why, George, cried the man. Then he saw the note. Well, that comes from teaching the alphabet to a little monkey, and I told you no tricks. You may not eat any donuts now, George. Put them back in the bag and let's get on with the letters. The big U is a big umbrella standing upright. The umbrella handle is also like a U. George knew how to use an umbrella. The small U is a small umbrella. When it's raining, umbrellas are useful, but you must keep under the umbrella unless you want to get wet. George thought rain was a nuisance. The big V is a big Valentine, and the small v is a small Valentine. George loved Valentines. He got several Valentine cards every year. One card came from Nevada. The big W and the small w are whiskers, big ones and small ones. The walrus has whiskers, and some men have whiskers, and cats have whiskers. George did not have whiskers, but he was curious how he would look if he did. The next letter of the alphabet is X. The big X and the small x look alike, only one is big and one is small, just like the big W and the small w, or the V or the U or the S and some of the other letters. But, said the man, there are a few words that start with an X, and they don't look like an X except for one, and that's Xmas. Santa stands for Xmas, and there's one Santa, so we need only one picture. George thought Xmas was exciting. The big Y is a big yak, and the small y is a small yak. He's still young. Yaks live in Tibet. If you haven't seen any yaks yet, you might find one at the zoo. The big Z is a big zebra, and the small z is a small zebra. The zebras are zipping along with zest. And you know what, said the man? Z is the last letter. Now you know all the 26 letters of the alphabet, and now you may have the donuts. The end. And look, he spelled it out with donuts. I almost think that that's a waste of donuts, but they have 120 donuts, so I guess they have some to spare. And the last page shows George eating donuts and reading a book. And there you have it. Check out Seesaw for the activity that I want you to do with this book. Thanks for listening.